In this conversation exploration, we're going to look at ego. What is it? And what are some of the problems of a weak ego, of a strong ego? Let's look at some of the continuums. So the ego is another word for I, for identity. And the ego is the identity that I attach to, that I hold on to and reference as me. So what's identity? It's a pattern, right? When I look in the mirror and I see that pattern, that's the angle. That's the angle. It's this angle and this angle. And I say, oh, that's me. Why? Because it is a return to a familiar, a family shape, a shape from the past. I saw that shape before. I heard that sound before, right? I spoke in that language before. I smelled that smell before, right? And in order to return, in order to remember, to put the members back together again, it has to be from the past. And it not only has to be from the past, but it has to be a recognize, right? A reassembly of a recurring past pattern, right? So we have to recognize the past in the present and say, that's me, right? And so our identity that I attach to, that we attach to, our identity consists of our patterns, our pattern of thinking, our pattern of feeling, our pattern of speaking, our pattern of doing, and our pattern of being. And from an identity perspective, the origin is being and thinking, right? Because being includes sensation, right? So I'm here, right? But I have certain temperature sensations. That's part of the being state, right? I am a certain temperature. I am, who I am, my body, is in a certain state. Now that's, of course, connected innately to the ecology. But I'm not identifying, I'm not holding on to the ecology, I'm holding on to the me that emerges out of the ecology, right? If I'm in a volcano, I have a very perhaps short-lived identity, but I'm identifying with being excruciatingly hot, right? And it's, I'm not identifying, I'm not attaching to the ecological dynamics that are creating that. So the other areas of identity, emerge out of thoughts and states, right? And thoughts and states connect, right? Because if we look over here, we have the environment creating our state. And if we look over here, we have our thoughts creating our words, feelings, and actions that produce behavior about how we relate to the environment, right? So when we think making money is a good idea, we go to work. And the work environment is different from the environment that we're in somewhere else. And so we have these two centers, the ecological context that we are in, or that we put ourselves in, or that other people put us in. And we have our thoughts, right? Because as soon as I think a thought, I'm unworthy, I have feelings. Right? I have feelings in response to that thought. The thought is spoken, meaning without the words, I am unworthy. Right? Those are words. Those are spoken in the mind, right? But there is an innate correlation between our thoughts and what we say to ourselves. And then sometimes if we don't like what we say to ourselves and are ashamed of it, or believe there's a benefit of some reason, we will say one thing to ourselves and we'll say another thing to other people. We'll say to ourselves, I'm unworthy. And then we'll say to someone else, you're not good enough to lick my boots, right? And of course, that's schizophrenia, right? There's a gap. But, in that, we have the outer identity, or the outer persona, the projected image, and then we have the image that we believe, right? That we are praying to, that we are believing to be real, right? So a belief is simply a assumption that cannot be proven one way or another. So it's a working hypothesis, right? And so we have our working hypothesis, and then we have the hypothesis we want other people to work with. We may think to ourselves, I don't know if I can do this job, but we want the person hiring us to work with the hypothesis that they can definitely do that job, perhaps. And so we'll say, oh yeah, I can do that job. And we say, oh, I hope I can do that job. So the source of the pattern is the ecology, which we are innately connected with, right? Because this is one of the little tricks of ego, is the ego is often in a somewhat delusionary state that it is separate from its ecology. That's the ecology. Oh, it's dirty out here, but I'm clean, right? It's not safe out there, but I'm safe, right? Or those are trees out there, but they have nothing to do with me. So this illusion is somewhat a function of cult hypnosis, right? A cult is just a group of people that all agree to believe certain things that have no clear objective foundation for the belief, right? You might just as well believe this other thing. In fact, millions of people do, and millions of people believe this other thing. So, a cult is simply a group of people that agree to hold a belief as a foundational assumption and act as if. And you can be part of our cult. If you agree that this is a hand, well, why not a sand? Why not a pand? Right? Why don't we call it a fand? No. In our cult, we call it a hand. And if I call it a sand, well, you're not part of our cult then, right? This is the cult that speaks English. And in English, this is a hand, right? Why? Well, it's a network, right? Just, that's what it is, right? So this is a hand. And, well, there it is. So that's a working assumption, right? They're just sounds that in some way correlate. And then what is a hand? Well, it's something with 5 fingers. Well, why isn't it something with 5 spaces between fingers? Why isn't that a hand? Well, no, we focus on the finger. We don't focus on the space, right? But you couldn't have fingers without spaces around them. So why not focus on the space? Why isn't this 5 spaces defined by something, right? This is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 4 spaces. Why isn't it 4 spaces instead of 5 fingers? I mean, who cares about the finger? These are the spaces, right? Well, that's also a cult assumption. It's a default, right? So we're all members of a cult, and the cult determines certain things. Statistically, you can look out and you'll find that, members of your cult are all, 90%. They're going to work in this way at this time. Why? Well, that's just the working hours. Don't we have electricity? Why don't we sleep during the day and have a nightlife, right? And get to enjoy fireworks well, it's just not what we do in our cult, right? We sleep at night and go to work during the day. It's just what we do, right? So, these are innate connections, cultural connections. But then there's also, of course, if there's a forest fire and we're nearby, we will be hot. It's not there is a fire and we are not that fire. No, as we become proximate, as we get closer to a fire, to a flood, to an earthquake, to a tree falling, to a building falling, to a car moving, right? We are not separate from our environment, right? Our environment is allowing us and creating us and influencing us. It's allowing us, creating us, and influencing us in every moment, right? Everything that's here, everything that you see here was once out there. All the atoms were once out there, now they're here. That's pretty connected. All the air that I'm breathing was once out there and now it's here. That's pretty connected. All the liquid that was once out there and is now here, that was once out there. And all the food that's in here was once out there. And that's happening in every single moment, right? I'm engaging. There's water in my breath, right? That tree is creating oxygen, and it's coming in here. And then I'm creating carbon dioxide, and that's going out there, right? And so there is, in fact, a flow and a dance between the I that we identify with, the identity that we I with, and everything around us. And yet there's also a connection between what we think and the reality we create around us and the places that we choose to be, right? So I had a thought about 30 minutes ago, let's explore weak identity. And then I had another thought that said, well, let's go into ego and identity in a more comprehensive way. And then I had a feeling, right, that was a good idea. That's the thing to do, and it felt good, right? So I moved my body into the filming room, and then I changed the environment to be this environment, right? So that all came from a thought, right? But the thought wouldn't come if there wasn't a film room. And I wouldn't look like this if there weren't lights. And I wouldn't sound like, so there's this dance between thought and reality. So those are the two cores, the ecology, right? If it's very, very hot out and a forest fire is coming your way, that will create a thought. Let's get out of here. And if you have a thought, let's have a fire, and we don't have to be safe with fire because it all works out for the best, right? The universe, the divine plan, it all works out for the best. Let's have a fire, and then, there's a forest fire, right? So the thought can create a forest fire, and the forest fire can create a thought. Right? Let's get out of here. There's a forest fire. Let's have a fire, and there's a forest fire. So that's going back and forth all the time as the genesis. And of course, you don't feel great when you say, with little mouth noises, do you compose a thought, right? I am a terrible person. Oh gosh, right? I'm a terrible person. Right. So the feelings and behavior and what we may say and and do and comes out of the thought, but also the thought comes out of reality, right? Statistically speaking, grown-ups who think I'm a terrible person were shamed and abused as children, were traumatized in such a way that the only story that infant, that child could come up with is, I'm a bad person. I'm a bad person. Otherwise, why would God do this to me? Why would reality do this to me? Give me someone who beats me, gives me someone that shouts at me, who asks me to do things I can't do. I must be doing something wrong. I'm a bad person, right? And so you have the reality, the ecology, creating thoughts, and then you have thoughts creating reality, right? Creating the context, right? So these are going back and forth. And initially, we were all infants, right? When we were 1, 2, 3 years old, initially, we were all infants and we couldn't think. We had no words to think. And so all of the code, all of the download of supposition, of belief, of identity was created by the giants around us. So initially, the whole pattern on both sides of our parents, like the family system pattern that's in the body of our father, the family system pattern that's in the body of our mother, is passed down by their ancestors in all of its different code trails and conflicting conversations. That was all passed down and given to us, as was the reality that came out of that. And then as we developed language, we made up stories. I'm an okay person. I'm unlovable. I'm never going to be safe. We made up stories that seemed to make sense if the world revolved around us, right? Every child is self-centered. Every infant is self-centered, right? And so this whole thing must be about us. I must be unlovable because nobody is loving me, right? I must be weak because I cannot defend myself. I must be helpless because I need help and I cannot help myself, right? And so these are the stories. Or people like me, but they don't like me for telling the truth. Every time Mom says, "What's your father been doing?" And I say, "Well, he's over there with that woman," right? She says, "Oh my goodness, the giant who I depend on hates me for telling the truth. What should I do?" Right? And then what did you tell your mom? I told her you were over there with that woman. Oh, like I'm bad for telling the truth. Or I'm bad. I'm bad, right? I'm bad, right? I that just came out, and everyone hates me because I said that. But that's what I saw, right? That's what they asked, right? But so it's all my fault, right? It's all my fault, right? It's not their fault for choosing one another. It's not their fault for lying. It's not their fault for being in a culture that shames both people for enjoying themselves sexually. No, the child makes it all about themselves. It's all about me, right? It must be, right? There couldn't be anything wrong with God, with Goddess, with the world. It must be something wrong with me, right? And if that becomes a belief and an article of faith, one then must act. I don't want anyone to see what's wrong with me, or they might push me away. I don't want anyone to see what's wrong with me. So right, I've got to push people away. I've got to hide, because otherwise they'll be angry when they see me, right? Right. So the formation of identity. Now let's look at the continuum of strength. So if we think of a strong identity, we think of a strong pattern. So what's a strong pattern, right? Well, a unified identity is a strong identity. So we could say that this is the continuum of unity versus fragmentation. So a unified pattern is a strong pattern. So what's a unified pattern? I feel worthless. Somebody says, "Who are you?" And you say, "I'm worthless." Right? So there's unity between our thought and our words. I feel worthless. My body takes on a posture that creates that feeling. And I live my life as if I'm worthless. And when other people say, hey, would you like to join? We say, no, I'm worthless. And then they treat us as worthless and say, no, we're not going to invite them. They're worthless. They said so, right? So when we think, feel, speak, do, and other people finally agree to treat us the way that we say that we are, that's a very strong, unified identity. There isn't a crack anywhere, right? The body says worthless. The reality says worthless. There's no money there. There's nothing nice there. Because why would I have a nice reality if I'm worthless? That doesn't make any sense. So a strong identity is a unified identity where heart, mind, body, right? Where words, where thoughts, where actions, where physiology, and where outer context all say the same thing: I am worthless. And then it's helped if other people join in and say, yeah, that's, what a dump, what a worthless life, right? So now we've got complete integrity. It's beautiful, right? We've got peace, right? There's no conflict, right? So a strong identity is one where everything inside and everything outside agrees on a supposition. Whatever it is, everyone finally agrees. So that's a very strong identity. Now, a very weak identity is divided, right? I say that rich people are bad, but I want to be rich, but I don't want to be bad. Rich people are bad. I want to be rich, but I don't want to be bad, right? So we're getting fragmented. And then they should do things because they've got money. They should have done. Why didn't one of those billionaires solve the hungry problem? They've got all that money. What are they doing with it, right? So people with more money should solve other people's problems. But I have more money than you, but no, I'm not rich enough, right? I'm not going to solve other people's problems with money. I'm not rich enough, right? It's like, yes, I've got 3 times more than you, and yes, you've got problems. Yes, I could solve them, but no, go talk with a very rich person. Now, I want to be richer, but I don't want to solve people's problems. And so these fragmentations, right, they don't add up, right? And I think I'm terrible inside, but everyone out there thinks I'm great because I'm putting on a performance. I've split the identity. I've got the inner identity and the outer identity. It's like, oh, gosh. I hope nobody finds what's going on in here, right? So this is a very weak identity. And it gets even weaker if it becomes erratic. Like if I always complain about rich people while I spend time getting richer, that's a stable insanity. That's a stable insanity. I'm insane, but I'm consistent about it, right? I always say rich people should solve the problems of the poor, and I never help the poor as I get richer and richer, right? So it's a stable absurdity. Now there's there's also volatility. So we're talking about this continuum is about integrity, right? So we're looking at that in as a continuum. Now, this other continuum is about volatility. Right? So volatility means today I think I'm great, and tomorrow I think I'm terrible. So that's pretty volatile. And one day I'm great, and I'm terrible. And then the next day I'm great, and then the next day I'm terrible. Well, which is it, right? Well, it's volatile, right? It's up, it's down, right? That's like a stock. It's worth $1,000 today, 0 tomorrow. But the next day, it's worth $1,000. It's like, which is it? Which is it, right? So we're, volatility. We're also, right? So you could look at another continuum being inner and outer. You could splice it, basically. You could say that, of this, we've got inner integrity, meaning I always treat myself badly, but I expect other people to treat me well, right? So I've got a split between my inner pattern and my outer pattern that's stable, right? You better treat me right. I think I'm a terrible person, but, don't you even think about it, right? I'll beat you up, right, if you say something bad about me. But I say something bad about myself, all the time. So this is, a weak, it's a 50% identity, right? That's out there, this is inside, and they don't really talk to each other, that much. So integrity, right? Integrity. The other kind of measure of identity is fragility or strength. Well, let's look at fragility and strength in a couple of different ways. So an identity can be very, very fragile. And what I mean by that is you can have a whole thing where there's this huge narrative out in public, inside, there's a whole spiel, I'm doing this. And then one detail comes to light, comes into the public focus. You know, they're gay, they're they're a Muslim, they're this. Something that is taboo within one's cult, right? Every cult has things that it says we can't talk about these things, and they're just bad. And so if you get too close to them, you're not welcome in the cult, right? And these are not, cults function to create efficiency rather than complexity. Complexity is hard, right? You have to learn what each person means by that word. You have to learn how it's affecting them. And so a stereotype, right, where you just create a montage of a very simple thing where all people gay are this, this, and this, and all people who are Muslim are this, and all people who are capitalist are this. And it's really nice because you don't have to think, right? And cults function on conformity, and they function on an absence of complexity and thought. And so one of the shortcuts, the energy-saving mechanisms that a cult offers its members is taboos. Automatically, sex with children, bad. And who's a child? Anyone under the age of 18 is just bad. So, right, at age 17, right, they're 17 and 360 days old. And having sex with that person is unforgivable. A 17-year-old girl. Oh, unforgivable. But 4 days later, they can, BDSM, whatever, right? Two consenting adults don't interfere. They want to hang upside down and be whipped. Nobody interfered. Just keep out of their business. That's a cult meme as well. What is business? Right? It's what they do in the privacy of their own home. Well, is it private? Right? Seems like those scars show up the next day. Or, if you have a drunken orgy, it seems like if they're a bus driver, well, that's a different matter, right? So you have these cult things, and it's just, they had sex with a child. Unspeakable. And that's tells you're in the territory of a taboo, right? Right. And every cult has a different taboo, right? You might go to an indigenous tribe, and of course they're getting married at 14, right? You might go to a different country, and sure, as long as the families are happy with the setup and all that, or the dowry is rich enough or whatever, I mean, of course, right? But, right? So every cult has areas that it makes incredibly efficient by just saying you can't talk about them and you can't question them. That's dogma, right? The wisdom of dogs, not the wisdom of a complex mind, but we just can't, we can't even discuss them because the frozen state of blame, of horror, of judgment, of that's not thinking. That's a intergenerational reaction to something. Right? That's an intergenerational reaction to something. Back in Napoleon's time, there was a law in the cult that if a woman was pregnant, you couldn't cut off her head. Cutting off a woman's head Of course, right? The guillotine, bravo, new science and innovation, cutting off a woman's head. Let's go see whose head is being cut off today, right? But cutting off the head of a pregnant woman, no. Horrible, unthinkable. Will not be done, right? And so the women in prisons with male guards would beg the guards to have sex with them so that they could prolong their life, right? In other words, you're going to be executed in 3 months. Hello, right? Hello. Would you mind having sex with me so that I won't be put to death for 12 months, right? Because something could happen in that time, right? Maybe new evidence would be found, right? It's reprehensible. Guards having sex with the prisoners, cutting off a woman's head, no problem. Sex between prison guards and prisoners, that's slut, right? That's slut. No morals, unspeakable, right? She gets out of prison, saves her life a year later, useless. No one should marry her. She had sex with a prison guard, right? We kill our women, but hey, we're part of a cult, right? And so taboos are part of this dynamic of fragility. Now, why? Well, there is a law of mass, and it's represented by the pinball and the bowling ball. So the pinball, this big, rolling towards a bowling ball, this big, and they collide. And what happens, right? What happens when a pinball collides with a bowling ball, right? The pinball gets knocked off in whatever angle of attack they hit, right? If they hit like this, the pinball goes off like that. If they hit dead down, the pinball bounces back. Right, the pinball goes flying. It was happily going along, and then, shot off somewhere else, because the law of mass dictates that when a small body of energy collides with a big body of energy, the big body of energy always wins in a collision. The bowling ball continues unaffected. So this is like, a poor single mother trying to find justice against a rich sexual abuser in the courts, right? She's a single mother. She's working 3 jobs. She doesn't have time. She's got 2 people to feed. She's got childcare, so she can't afford a good lawyer, right? Now, the rich person who raped her can afford all kinds, and also is in a good mood, right? He enjoyed the rape. She didn't. Is given all kinds of cult messages that something's wrong with her, that she shouldn't have let it happen, that she's making a big deal out of it. So she's, her life is in turmoil. Her income is going down. Her boss is saying, focus, get the job done. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about how do I deal with this injustice? Well, that's not what we pay you to do. Get to work, right? And go to your 3 jobs and do this, right? Meanwhile, right? So it's a shattering state of affairs. And then you look around and you realize that everyone's okay with this. We call this justice. This is justice. This is fine because it's, right? The innocent are innocent unless proven guilty. I thought the innocent were innocent and the guilty were guilty whether they are proven or not, right? There's, so-and-so got better lawyers and so they didn't commit the crime. Like this is absurd, right? But when you have a whole cult, millions of people that all look at you as if you're a slut or look at you as if you're a predator, right? You abused power. You abused power on the job, right? You asked your employee to have sex with you. Oh, could you believe it? Could you believe it? Right? And they said no? Right? But they felt pressured, right? And it's just, it's terrible, right? Is love bad? Is attraction bad? Is sex bad? On the job, it's bad. So is it bad to suppress the truth? Just don't do it. Don't do it, or don't get caught, right? Cults don't like to think, in detail. But someone with a fragile identity has had traumatic experiences before where little things, my dad was smiling and what a good girl you are, and you spilt your milk. Oh, you spilt your milk. It's a fragile identity. It's like one little slip and my entire life. Dad hates me. Now that I went to school and the entire class humiliated me because I was crying. One fucking cup of milk. And I have no father, developed complex PTSD, am humiliated in school, and the teacher, who I liked before, just smiled and told me to get over it. And I hated that teacher for the rest of my school. One cup of milk. And a devastating chain of events, right? And then mom fought with dad for making such a big deal out of a milk. And then he left. No father. And then mom hated me, right? Why do you have to be so sensitive? And why did you have to spill that milk? Now we have no money and da-da-da-da-da, right? A fucking cup of milk. That's a fragile identity. When your whole life pivots on a cup of milk. You see, and for many it did. For many it did. There was one thing, right? My period happened when Dad was having a business meeting and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know that we weren't supposed to talk about the things that nobody talks about not talking about. And Dad blames the failure of his career on me. Disgusting, right? Right? And Mom snickers and looks at me in a way that snickers with her friends and looks at me in a way that I have no idea what to do with this. It's all changed because of one small thing, right? And so when that trauma is the experience of the pinball, right? So the pinball and the bowling ball collide and the pinball goes flying. Its pattern is shattered. Now, sometimes when a big and small object collide, they actually fall apart, right? The structure of molecular structure just falls apart, as in a bullet wound or whatever. But even when the material substance stays the same, the experience of going along and just being hit out into left field, bounced off completely in shock, is such a terrifying experience that many people live their entire lives in an undercurrent of trying to protect themselves from never having that happen again. And when one piece of information that is taboo, see, and everyone has taboo information. If not directly with them, then with their partner. If not directly with them, then with their child, with their parents, right? See, taboos do not solve problems. For example, people have been molesting children, or, a more scientific way of saying it would be that grown-ups or big people have been engaging with the sexual organs of small people or children throughout recorded history, right? There has never been a cult in the last 100,000 years, to our knowledge, where there haven't been a certain percentage of big bodies doing something with the sexual organs of a certain percentage of small bodies. Right? So that's a statistical pattern. If you get 1 million people together, and some of them are big and some of them are small, etc., and you have 1 million people together, that has always happened, right? And in some cults, it's been no big deal, right? Her son is crying, mom masturbates the 3-year-old, and he stops crying. Come on, do this. Son is crying, give him a bit of whiskey, put him to sleep, right? Let's just give a baby whiskey. Let's just do this. Let's do that. Let's stick him in a room, and we've got, things to do. Let's, kids die, I don't have time to look for all that. So throughout history, different cults have responded in a variety of different ways to these situations, right? But we have created a Christian cult where we have a public image of, help the poor, but we have growing homelessness and we're not helping them, right? And so we have this montage of this is the right thing to do, and then we have areas like helping the poor, which nobody does that, and so we just don't talk about it. It's taboo to talk about our hypocrisy, but nobody's upset that you didn't help the poor or the meek to inherit the earth. And thou shalt not kill, but thank you for serving your country and going and killing other people around the world in a peacekeeping mission. I mean, that's fine. We've always been schizophrenic about killing, right? Thou shalt not lie, but we refuse to elect any politician who tells the truth, right? We don't want a politician who tells the truth. Have you ever broken the law? Yes, I cheated on my taxes back in 1978. My wife cheated on her taxes last year, and I didn't tell anyone. My son is addicted to crack, and I cover it up. Yes, I've smoked marijuana, and yes, I've had sex with a 17-year-old girl. But nothing else, right? And nothing particularly out of the ordinary. But that's the stuff. Oh, my goodness. We're not electing him. He told the truth, right? Fuck that. Did you cheat? Nobody's going to look at my tax returns. It's a private business of a dignified citizen, right? Oh, very good. We're going to elect you because you lied, right? 5% of priests molesting children, right? Did you do anything about that? No, we sent them to another parish because we're good Christians, right? The taboo is talking about it. Oh, another one, right? So we have things that we can talk about, and a fragile identity is when something that your group of people can't digest, that changes their image of you, and because one of the other continuums is, that ties into this fragility, is, are you inward or outward focusing? right? Because some people, they just care about what they think of themselves. And if they can go to sleep and they're happy, then they're happy. And yeah, other people don't understand me. They weren't there. They don't see things the way I do. They've been brainwashed, of course. You know, they're cult members. But I like who I am because I think this is a good thing. I like who I am, and I'm pleased with that. And I think this is fine. You know, they all think I'm a horrible person, right? Because I'm rich, or because I'm poor, or because I'm homeless, or because I have multiple lovers, or I'm homosexual, or they all think it's horrible. But I look at it and I say, you know, this seems like I've taken what's been given me and I've made it better, right? I was given a barren field. I've now got some crops to grow on it. No, it's not as nice as these fields over there, but they were given fertile fields, right? You know, you take one person, you give them a barren field, no irrigation, no topsoil, out in the baking sun, right? No well. If they can get something to grow on that, that's a pretty masterful, you know, piece of work there. Someone else, drip irrigation everywhere, 30 years of farming experience, 2 feet of topsoil, perfect climate for growing things, friendly neighbors offering to help, and they manage to grow 10 times more. They may be terrible farmers, right? It's just different starting points, different contexts, right? I come from a family of worthlessness and I feel mildly worthy. What an accomplishment. I've made progress, right? I come from a family of great superiority and confidence, and we all think of ourselves as amazing and take good care of ourselves, but, you know, I feel mildly guilty, right? Because I don't do anything to maintain that state, right? So you have the fragility of identity, and the fragility of identity has to do with the traumatic history and also has to do with how inner or outer it is, right? Because if your identity, how you think of yourself, rests on the foundation of you just look around every day, do you like me, you like me, do you like me? Oh, you all like me. Okay, I'm a good person. And then you do something taboo, or there's a character assassination. Gossip goes around. Did you hear that priest didn't pay his taxes, says a malicious gossiper, right? And the priest did pay their taxes, but that goes around as gossip. And now people are, that person didn't pay their taxes. And that's taboo in that cult. Suddenly, I feel like such a bad person. What have I done? I didn't know I was a bad person. I thought I was a good person, right? And so a whole identity that's based on other people shifts by one piece of gossip that people at least question, right? And so you have tremendous fragility. So these are some of the dynamics of identity, and we'll leave it for there. We'll leave it there for now.